The installation detail that we're looking at right now is the exposed fastener gable trim. This is the trim piece that I have right here. On this side, on the roof side, we have a fastening flange. This is the face, the exterior face that has a drip edge on it, and this piece here is what caps off the gable of the roof. So if I put this piece in place just to mark it, the first thing that we need to do is measure and cut the angle so that this gable trim is flush with the end wall. So I'm going to measure the distance from here to the wall, and that's going to give me the difference that I need to cut into the piece. I'm going to take the measurement from the top of the trim to the end wall, and that's going to give me my angle. So in this case, you can see that it's 2 inches. I'm going to go cut that and come back so we can mark the corner of the gable where it meets the eave. So if you remember, we need to cut the angle into this gable trim so that it meets the end wall. We measured the difference. It was 2 inches. I'm going to make a mark right here at 2 inches, and I'm going to join this mark with the corner. So we'll do that right now. Just making a mark here. We'll cut this. Now that we've cut the angle into the trim, we can see that it's flush here with the end wall, and now we can make our marks for the corner. So as we've done with previous trims, I'm going to make a mark in line with the fascia on the reverse side so that we know where to cut it and where to bend it. We're going to cut a little bit more than 1 inch past so that we know where to bend. So now that I have my marks, I'm going to cut along these lines, and I'm going to bend along the lines that I traced off of the fascia. Now that we finished the 2 ends of the gable trim, we finished the corner where it meets the eave, and we have finished the top where it meets the end wall by putting the angle into it. We've tested it to make sure that it fits nicely, and the next thing to do is apply tape seal underneath the nailing flange to make sure that we have a watertight seal between the roof panel and the gable trim. Now we have tape seal on the bottom of the nailing flange. We can go ahead and install this. All that's left to do now is put exposed fasteners every 2 feet, and then we're done. So what we have here is the concealed fastener rake or gable trim, and we're going to install this with a continuous cleat in the same way that we've shown installing the eave trim with a continuous cleat. To install the continuous cleat, it's the same as we've done with the eaves. The little trick here is to slide the continuous cleat into the hem of the trim piece. We're going to put it here against the roof, let it stick out by about 1 inch. I'm going to make a mark at the crease line. We're going to do the same thing towards the peak of the roof. So we're going to let it stick out again just a little bit past. We're going to make a mark. Now that we've made our marks for the continuous cleat, we're going to just take off the rake or gable trim, take the cleat out, and I'm going to go ahead and install it. And as you can see, the continuous cleat is running wild past the ridge line. So we're just going to cut this so that it's... Now that we have the continuous cleat installed, we can go ahead and make our marks on the roof for the Z trim. So this is Z trim. It has paint on one side, and you can see primer on the other. It's very important when installing it that the paint be on the roof side, so that when people look up at the roof, they see continuous color through all the trim. So we're going to go ahead and position this on the roof so that we can fasten it to the roof deck and then install the rake gable trim. So now that I have the rake trim in place, I'm going to take our Z trim, I'm going to slide it underneath so that I can make a mark with a Sharpie on the roof deck so I know where to install it. I'm going to make a mark on the panel so that I know where to fasten the Z trim down. Just using a Sharpie. So we have our marks on the roof for the Z. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it to length. 2 snips. Bend it. Now the Z trim has been cut to length, and what we have to do is apply tape seal to to the bottom and then fasten it to the roof deck. So the Z-trim has tape seal underneath. It's in place according to the marks that we made on the roof, and now I'm going to fasten it down. Before we put the gable trim on, we need to put tape seal on top of the Z-trim to make sure that water doesn't roll between the gable trim and the Z and into the roof. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the tape seal to the top of the Z, as we have at the eave and other places on the roof. Now we're ready to install the gable trim using pop rivets with tape seal in between the gable trim and the Z. There are two finished details on the gable trim that we're going to show right now. One is the detail that takes place at the corner at the eave, and the other is the finished detail that takes place at their peak. For the corner detail at the eave, we're going to mark the gable trim, and then we're going to make a series of simple folds so that when you look at the corner of the roof, it's nice and clean and boxed in. So I'm going to make a mark in line with the face of the fascia. I'm going to mark behind, and those are going to be my bend lines. I'm going to fold the side in first, and then I'm going to fold the top down, and all I'm doing is closing off this hole here that we have. And I need to come down about 1.5 inches. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to use a square just to extend my line. So you can see that I've extended my line across the top. And on the reverse, so we're going to extend this line. And these two lines are now my bend lines. And when I look at it, I can see that they are pretty much in line with one another. I'm going to go ahead and extend those lines by 1 inch, which is the width of this ruler, so I know how much to bend them down and where to cut them. I'm going to go ahead and cut them now. In order to fold them, I'm going to make a cut along the spine here, up to my line. I'm going to miter that just a little bit. And on the reverse side, so now that we've made our marks, we've cut the excess metal off. I'm going to fold the side in first using the seamers. And then I'm going to fold the top, always along our lines. So now that we've finished the corner, we're going to clip it onto the continuous cleat so that we can install it. So we've closed off the end in line with the face. And then we're going to come up to the ridge line and we're going to prepare it for where they meet at the peak. For this particular piece, we're going to make our plumb line, and then we're going to leave a little bit of it extending so that the next one gets cut flush with the plumb line and they have a nice overlap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my mark. And a little trick is you can use your small square. Once I'm level, I make my trace, and that is my plumb line. I'll cut a little bit past that so that we have a nice overlap when the other gable trim gets installed. In this case, all I'm going to do is cut off the drip edge along that line. And I'm going to leave this tab on so that we have a nice overlap when the next gable trim comes on. Now that we have a finished gable trim, we've finished the corner at the eave, and we have finished the peak end as well for the overlap with the next gable trim. Now we can go ahead and install this on top of the Z-trim, making sure to use tape seal between the Z-trim and the gable trim. So you can see that we have the tape seal on top of the Z-trim, and now I'm going to go ahead and install the gable trim by clipping it in to the continuous cleat, making sure that it's nice and tight on the front of the corner here, and making sure that we're following our plumb line at the ridge. Now that the gable trim is in place, we can go ahead and fasten it to the Z-trim through the tape seal using pop rivets. So the first thing I'll do is I'll drill a hole for the first pop rivet, making sure that I'm going through the gable trim and the outer leg of the Z-trim. You want to make sure that when you go through the Z-trim, you don't actually punch down and put a hole through the panel of the roof. So using a standard pop rivet tool, these are 1/8 inch pop rivets that have been painted to match the roof. We're going to go ahead and install this through the Z-trim. Now that I've installed the first pop rivet, I'll be installing the rest going all the way to the ridge, and I'll be spacing them at 1 foot on center. And there you have an installed gable trim, hidden fasteners using a Z-trim and a continuous cleat.